All right. Oh, that's interesting. Who opened Revit 2013? All right. So this little session is meant kind of as a update. We did the 2013 materials update, and it was awesome because it was really confusing. Ask Kelly. And this is kind of meant to be a 2014 materials update, along with a really kind of a crash course on how to create materials for putting together finish schedules and getting the parameters and the information that you need for the materials to be smart in our models. So I'm going to go through basically the interface first and show kind of the default settings and how I have used that in TCU Dining for the elevations for materials already. And then I'm going to go through that process of how to add information and parameters that you need in order to get tagging to work. And I'm also going to go through creating tags so that you can display the information that you put in the materials properly in your views. Does all that sound like what you signed up for?
And more.
You guys sound really excited about starting this. Okay, so in 2014, the materials are still under Manage Materials here. And let's see if I can do this. The dialog is, believe it or not, the workflow for the dialog is the exact same as 2013, but the interface has changed to where it actually makes sense. So instead of having all these different windows pop up that show the appearance asset and the graphics asset and all that fun stuff, they put it all in tabs over here. So it actually makes sense. So on the left, we still have our actual material. Okay, this is the material object that exists in the model. All right, and below this pane is set up into. I got it as close as I could.
That's good. Good.
There we go. So on the left over here, we've got basically this is your library area. You've got on top the project materials, which are all of the materials which are actually in the project you're currently working on. And down below are the material library materials. And we have several different libraries. You've got the ones that came with it. You've got the Autodesk library and the AEC library. And then there's a couple different libraries that we've started putting together. Here's one for TCU materials, which contains materials which are used in multiple TCU projects. We've got a roofing library. We have a masonry library. And these you can all load into your material dialogs box. That's a different session. So, what you're going to be concentrating on is not crashing Revit while in the materials dialog box. By the way, 2014 materials are just as unstable as 2013 materials, so anytime you open the materials dialog box, you want to save before you get into this dialog box. Okay. Anytime you open the materials dialog box, you want to save before you open the materials dialog box. Any questions about that? Okay, so what do we do before we open the materials dialog box? There we go.
Here's a question.
Yes.
I know that sometimes when you alter the shape of, let's say, a ceiling, the material disappears. Is that an issue with 14?
Well, let's do this first.
Okay.
And then we'll do Q&A. Okay, so the material itself over here comes with a couple different, let me get rid of this box here, which doesn't want to go away. All right. So each material has different assets. Okay, we have an identity asset, which always comes with the material itself. This is basically, you could call it your type parameters for the material. So you've got a description, a classification, which you can classify it as any of these material classifications: textile, paints, plastics, things like that. If you have manufacturer, model, cost, or even a cut sheet or spec sheet URL, you can go to that. Keynotes, mark, So we'll get to how we're using these parameters in a little bit. This is your basic parameter information. You also have a graphics asset, okay? And this is basically how it's going to look in your 2D views. All right, so you've got cut pattern, which when you cut the object that has this material assigned to it, shows the cut pattern. Surface pattern is what shows up when you're looking at the face. Shading, this is how, anybody know the difference between the shading color and the surface pattern color? Okay. Your surface pattern color, okay, this applies to the pattern that you assign to it. So if you assign diagonal lines to it, all right, and you assign that to blue, because we like blue, we like our air to be blue, right? All right, that means that those lines are going to show up as blue. All right, now if you put a color for shading, this color is only going to appear when you are in shaded views. All right, so if you're in a hidden line view, this is what shows up here. And when you're in a shaded view, this is what shows up here. Okay. We'll demonstrate that in a little bit. Our appearance asset, you want to take a guess what the difference between graphics and appearance asset is?
Model versus
Close. Model versus 3D versus 2D? Okay. Then that is, I think, one of the biggest confusions that people have about what these two tabs are, graphics and appearance. Appearance is actually what a material looks like when you render it or when you look at it from a realistic view, as opposed to a shaded view or a hidden line view. All right, so think of this as if you're in SketchUp, you know how you can turn textures on or just color by layer? All right, if you turn textures on, then you're seeing what shows up in the appearance tab here. All right, if you turn textures off, then this is what you see right here. Does that make sense to everyone?
yes.
All right. So you see this in 3D also, all right? But this you see in 3D, you see both of these in 3D and 2D, okay? But appearance only shows up when you're in a realistic or rendering view. All right? Thermal asset, there might be 2 or 3 of you in the room that might actually be concerned about this. We use this, you can use this when doing energy analysis on a building for LEED certifications. You can actually give a material a thermal asset so that you can tell it, you know, what the R value, reflectivity, you know, all these things that you need in order to do your calculations for energy efficiency. You can put all that in here. And what Revit actually does is when you put materials in an assembly layer in a wall, for instance, it will add up all the R values and get the entire R value of the entire assembly for you. So you don't need to worry about this so much when you're creating interior finish information. And I'm going to find one more. There's actually one more asset tab that I want you guys to see. All right. So there's another one that popped up here. So we've got our identity asset, graphics, appearance, thermal, and then we've got physical. So you can actually give a material a physical property. For instance, you can give it strength properties. Right? You can give it a tensile strength if you want to. And this will actually help when you put things into Revit structures for it to actually use the materials to start calculating or to include that in whatever analysis for structural analysis. Not a lot of people use this, but you need to know where this stuff is. Any questions so far? Do the tabs make a lot more sense than all those windows that were popping open in 2013? Okay. So no one's afraid to go in here and look at this anymore, right? All right. The bad news is there is one window that you do have to open up in order to get to these different things, and that is the asset library. All right. that's not what I meant to hit. So let's say that we want to give steel a different appearance. All right, so we're going to replace this asset. All right, and this brings up our asset browser. And since we're looking at appearance assets, what we want to make sure of is that we're in the appearance library. Okay, you can see that there's different libraries. There's a physical asset library and an appearance library. All right, so these all contains rendered materials that you can assign to it, or you can duplicate, create new ones. All right, I'm not going to really go through. If we have time, I'll come back and we'll talk about how we can duplicate these and start creating our own materials. But for now, I want to get into the information that we want to actually include into things like finish schedules and tagging and all that fun stuff. All right, so I'm going to show you a quick example of how this is being used currently. And to do that, we're going to go to some building elevations here on TCU Dining. All right, so we've got a beautiful little elevation here. All right, this is our DD level elevation. And you can see we've got all these notes here, and these are actually tags for the materials being used. Okay, and the reason that we would like to use tags instead of text would be pop quiz. Universal changes, consistency. Okay, so that cast stone masonry here doesn't end up as cast stone one word masonry on another sheet, or cast STNEO masonry on another sheet. So if we make a change in one spot here, if we can figure out how to click it. Alright, so if we make one change here, if I can learn to type. Alright, so if we make that change here, you're thinking, well, I just changed some text. Why is it taking so long? It's actually updating every instance where that's tagged anywhere in the model. So anywhere that that's being shown, it's going to show up as that. Okay? And this process basically is a two-part process. The first is putting the information into the material itself, and the second is creating a tag which brings that information out of the material. All right, so let's look at what we're doing in this wall to get the material to show up. All right, this is a stacked wall, so I'm going to have to tab through, get this. All right, and we can see that this tag is showing up. It's pointing at this sweep right here. So I'm going to come in here and look at the sweeps. Don't worry about how to get to this stuff because you won't be dealing with that with interior finishes quite so much. So we've got a couple of different sweeps here, and I didn't pull it over far, but you can see that this is highlighted blue over here now, and if I pick the other one, it's the one down here on the bottom on the left here. All right, so this is the one we're concerned about. So we're looking at the material that we want to apply to it. Okay. Any material parameter, you can click the ellipses on the right to bring your material dialog box up. All right. If I were a good little Revit user, I would have saved because I realized that I'm in the material dialog box, so I would have gone out of the wall dialog box to save and then come back into here. So we see we've got TCU cast stone material. It uses the TCU cast stone appearance asset, which has a bunch of stuff already predefined, right? And we've got a graphics asset that's being used that gives it these appearance definitions. But what I'm really concerned about here is under identity, okay? We're using the description parameter to give it the visible information in the view. All right, we can set all this other information if we needed to do quantity takeoffs on how much masonry or anything like that. We can use these parameters to filter and create schedules and all that stuff. Not quite as important right now. We're not using the keynote parameter anymore. I think office-wide it was kind of decided that we don't really like using that visibly. The system works really well, but for construction documents it really isn't where we're wanting to go. And then there's Mark, which any guesses is what we would use this for?
You have to fill out the description before the material populates with the node. Can you do that with your node?
In the schedule?
The description, Jerry,
Oh,
so
okay.
masonry, can you tag it and then note it there, or do you have to
Yeah,
note it first?
I'll do a
to get it
demonstration of
started?
that.
Okay.
Yeah. The mark parameter, any guesses what we would use that for? Yes. Finish tag. Okay. So, what would we call, if we were doing cast stone, what would we call that one?
CS1.
CS1. We put dashes in. Do we use caps lock? CS1.
Dash and space.
Okay. All right. So we can put that information in right now. All right. So I'm just going to hit OK there. We're going to update that material. So what we've done now is, and we hit OK in the material dialog box, which means those changes have been accepted. So even if we cancel out of the wall dialog box, it's still going to keep those changes that we made in the material dialog box. Anyone confused about that? Okay. So if I were to come in here and create a new tag to get the mark information out of here, we would hopefully see CS1 because we just created that. And what Kelly was asking a second ago was whether or not if we create a tag, so if I come in here and I create a new one of these, I'm going to do create similar. All right. He was asking, can we name? Let's see if I've got a material that's not tagged yet. Looks like I've pretty much got most of them covered. Oh, there we go. There's some glass. Spot. There we go. All right. Okay, so there's a material that's being used in here that hasn't been defined with a description yet. So it's a question mark. I can actually come in here and type in a material name. I have the same problem at the Shrug meetings. I forget how to type and use the mouse anytime I'm on this laptop. All right, so now if I come in here and create similar, if I come in here, and my keyboard shortcuts never work either. So now you can see as I hover over these, actually I think that's spandrel glass right there. So we could actually come in here and define spandrel glass also. But you can see the regular glass are all tagging as glass as we come through there. All right. You might be asking, well, why didn't you demonstrate on these question marks right here that are already existing? And you'll learn as we start tagging more materials for documentation that this is a bug that happens on every single project that you will do this on. So when you come in one morning and all of your tags look like this, all right, before you freak out and find the box of kittens for me to kill, I want you to select them, all right, and you can just nudge them up and down, all right, and all that's happened is it's lost its host. It doesn't know what it's supposed to be pointing at. Either something changed in the elevation to make it disassociate from the actual material. Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can undo that. Yep. Okay. So all I did, all right, I selected it and I hit the up arrow on the keyboard, and then I hit the down arrow. All right. And I hit the down arrow just to put it back in place. I'm OCD like that. All right. So going back to our demonstration here. Right, we got a material here, it's Jerry Stone material, or Jerry Stone masonry. All right, so if I wanted to call out the mark for that material, all right, I would need a tag that shows that parameter. All right, so let's go into creating that tag to call out that parameter. Before I do that, though, are there any questions about anything that I've talked about so far?
Is that the old mess with the geometry disassociate items with the tag going missing with the question mark? Like you go in and edit the wall to change its profile or whatever, and it, like it does with the line work. If you do line work and you edit the geometry, the line work changes. Is that the same thing that happens to make it a question mark?
Kind of.
So every time you change wall geometry, you may have something drop out.
Well, it's a little different because with this you can just nudge it up or down, but with line work you have to go back and redo the line work. It's a similar bug, but it's not. It could be a number of things.
Okay.
It's usually actually either the elevation itself, in this case the elevation is moved, or something within the elevation has caused that tag to not know which plane in depth it's supposed to be on in order to pick that material. Any other questions? Okay. So to pull the parameters that we need, all right, out of the model, right, it seems like we're pulling them out of thin air, but we're really not. All right. So tags are, anyone want to take a guess? Annotations. All right. And it's going to be,
Yes.
he's not showing off. All right. We're going to do generic tag or generic annotation? Curveball. There we go. Because it is a tag, not just a note. All right. This is basically just giving you instructions. You can read that on your own time. We want to create a label. All right. Labels are basically what pulls information out of objects that you're tagging. All right. And we're going to place it right there in the middle. Okay. And we want to use the mark parameter, okay, because that's the one that that's the parameter that we want to use. I'm going to throw that in my parameter list over here. And I'm just going to give it a sample value of, I'd like to make it the maximum number of digits that we're going to have so that we can see how it's going to look in a worst case scenario. All right. So I'm going to throw that in there, and that's what's going to show up for now. All right. Now, a lot of you have asked me, this is kind of a sidebar, but it'll answer a question a lot of people come to me about. Either you're looking at a view title or something where the words wrap, and you're like, well, how do I get that to not wrap? Okay, that is all controlled by, in the tag family or in the view title family, how long this label box is. All right. And the size of this label box is going to be exactly the same size on a sheet as it is right here. So if I come in here, I'm just going to create some lines here. All right. So if I create a line 1 inch from there, look at that, my keyboard shortcuts still don't work on this computer. All right, so we've got 2 inches there. All right, if I wanted this to be a 2-inch long label, right, it's going to be 2 inches long on any sheet that it's on, no matter what the scale is. All right, same thing with the text size. It's going to be 3/32 inch. All right. So I'm just going to leave that there. I'm going to take these lines out because they will appear when we bring it into the family or when we bring it into the project. All right. Now, the one thing that I do need to tell Revit is what type of object we are actually pulling this information from. Okay, this is where categories become important. So if you're doing casework and you want to be able to tag the casework, you need to use casework tag because it's only looking for the casework properties of the object that you're trying to tag. All right, so if you're trying to pull finish information that you've put in a room, all right, you need a room tag to pull that finish information out. So in this case, we're using material. We want to pull information out of a material, so I'm going to use material tags. All right. So what this tells Revit is that I'm looking for the, I'm going to go back into my label, edit label. We're looking for the mark parameter of a material that we're hovering over. And the material comes from up here in the family category and parameters box here. Right. And I'm not going to name this for now. Typically at this point you would save it. Okay, I'll just go ahead and save it. So I'm just going to save this on my desktop. typically you would save this in either the family library or something like that, but I don't want to mess with that right now. So this is a material tag, and we might even put material mark tag. Alright, so when we're looking for our tags, we know that this is a material tag and that it's going to pull the mark parameter out of there. Alright, so I want to save that. Load it in the project. Go back to my elevation view. There we go. So now I need to go to the material tag tool. Right? And we've got our material tag that I didn't name properly. And I've got different alignments of that, which I might get into if we've got some time. Right? And then we've got our material mark tag. So I'm going to pull that out here, and you can see if our cast stone is going to tag properly. Of course it's not. Alright, so let's see if we can figure out why it didn't. So going back to Kelly's question about whether or not you can fill information here first or the other one. You can do it either way first. You can fill it in here, or you can fill it in the material properties. Right? In this case, I'm going to fill it out here with something that I know doesn't exist in that material, so that we can go back and figure out what property it is that I told it to tag. Alright, so at this point I would save because I'm about to go into the material dialog box. And we're going to TCU cast stone. That's the one that we're looking at. So we're going to go to identity. There's mark. Maybe I didn't save it before. Cast stone 1. Okay. There we go. So it looks like it didn't update it before, that's fine. Any questions to how we got to this point?
Let's say,
You sure, Kelly?
I'll be Kelly. So those notes that you have that say match TC blend, blah blah blah. Let's say you want that just in one line, because sometimes my issue with these kind of things is the flexibility is not there. Meaning you have multiple nodes and you want to like be able to stretch them or condense them. Does 14 allow you to do that?
Well, I mean, really you can do that with 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, but it's a very roundabout way. So the question is, okay, so we want this just on one line, okay? And in some cases we might want it on 2 lines because we have a compressed amount of space that we can put the node in, for instance on the side over here. So let's find an example. So this match TCU blend of Lidovici tile, okay? So here it would be appropriate to have that on one line, right?
Yep.
But over here, because we might have some space constraints, or even over on this side over here, we might have some space constraints, you would need it to wrap. Okay. So what you would have to figure out is how much space you really want, okay, and how much consistency you want between each sheet that has these notes. What you would do, all right, in this case, and that I'll actually get into also how I did these left align, right align with arrows and all that stuff. With this particular tag for description, all right, you can see that I've got some reference lines in here, right? And what I've done is I've created multiple labels. So you can see I just did a selection here, and I actually have 2 different labels actually. Okay, so I've got one label that is aligned to the right. You can see over here, aligned to the right. So I'm going to hide that real quick. or not really quick. All right, and then I've got another one that is left aligned. All right, and I've got these tied to visibility parameters that are controlled by that left aligned, right aligned type that you saw a second ago. So what I would do in this case, or what in the case that Chauncey is talking about, I would come in here and create a label. All right, and I've already set up my material category. So I'm going to set another label here, and I'm not going to worry about alignment right now. I know that this is the description, so I'm going to add that in here. I'm just going to put a bunch of stuff in there for now so we can get an idea of what that's going to look like. All right. So I'm going to take that, I just want it one line. All right, so I don't know how long it's going to be. I just know that I want it one line. All right, so what I would do in this case is I would tie this to a parameter. I'll call it long label. And for my right align type and my left align type, I don't want that. Or for my arrow one, so I'm going to create a new type called long label. All right. So what I've done now is I've created a type that only shows this label, which hopefully is long enough for us to get all of our information in there. Let's see if I can. I'm going to copy this information into here, and we'll see how much more space we need. All right, so that's pretty good lengthy description, so I think that's going to get us covered. So if I load this back into the project, so it looks like my types didn't quite update the way I wanted them to. It's okay, I can change them in here. Alright, so now when I select the long label, alright, we've got an alignment issue, which I knew was going to happen because of the way that the tag is set up. But you can see that you do have the flexibility of setting it up either single line or double line. So you see, Chauncey, why I was avoiding it's kind of a workaround. It's doable, but you still have to plan how much space you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it seems like.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So same thing with this one. If I make it
so then you still have to
long
put
label,
parameters if you want it to be left and right on top of that. So it's kind of all this back, this upfront work.
right? Again, it's the upfront work to get the ease of use down the line. All right. So that was actually a pretty good, I guess, advanced course on tag creation. As far as what you can do with it, I would say probably if you need something like this, to just let myself or Tyler or Kelly know. Yeah. But as far as getting information into this, hopefully you can see now how to do that as far as where to go in the materials dialog box. All right. So for this we used the description. All right. Still can't type on this laptop. All right, we used the description parameter and we used the mark parameter. All right, and then we created a tag that we created two different tags that was able to pull from both of those parameters. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about how to get the information in or the information out?
We will get to that when it's time.
All right. So now that we have this information in here, you're probably asking, okay, how do we create one of these with it? All right. So, well, this is actually from, where is it? This is from, Jenna sent this to me. This is from Toll Drive. So this is the phase 2. This is the interior housing part, right? Okay, so you can see here these columns. Okay, each of these columns is a parameter of the material itself. All right, so you can see here that we're going to have to start putting more information in as far as the symbol, which any guesses of which parameter that would be? Mark. All right, and then we've got material. Any guesses which parameter that would be?
Material.
Got a couple different schools of thought there. Myself, I would probably go in and either use the material name itself, all right, or because of the way we want to name materials, we can put another parameter inside the material that is the proper name for it. It looks like we're not using anything specific here, so it's not like we're saying Armstrong acoustical ceiling tile here. But we do see that we have several acoustical ceiling tile materials, all right, with different properties. So this might be something where we're using a parameter inside of the material to give us this information here. All right, manufacturer parameter, that's fairly straightforward. The pattern, this is where we start getting a little creative as far as how we are using it. Is this actually like a model number or a model? Is that what that is? Okay. So we could actually use the model parameter there to do that. Color and name, same idea. And then notes, all right? So I don't know that I would use that same description parameter in this finish schedule or this finish legend that we're looking at for any information in here, because I think it's two different types of information that we're doing. One is the actual presentation of the material on an elevation, and the other is giving us actual manufacturer and model information. So let's look real quick at how we would create the parameters for this information and how we would create a finished legend similar to this. So we're going to come in here and we're going to create a new schedule. Not a legend. We know this is called a finished legend, but we're not going to create a legend, we're going to create a schedule. Anyone want to throw a tidbit out as to why? The difference between the two in Revit?
Legend is the components that you're trying to.
Yeah, so you can create, a legend is a visual display of components. You can think of it that way. All right, a schedule is just textual or tabular information. All right, so this is going to be, I don't know why Revit's taking so long to do things. We're not doing a material takeoff. Okay, that's going to give us quantity information. All right, a little misleading there because we are dealing with materials. All right, but we're not going to deal with that right now. So we're going to do schedule and quantities. All right, and then once again we need to select. Okay, I was wrong. Sorry. So as you can see, materials actually is not on this list. All right, so when we're dealing with materials, we do actually need to use material takeoff. That was my bad. All right, and we're going to be pulling materials from every category. So we're going to look at every category in the model and pull materials that are applied to objects from every category. All right, and we're just going to call this, am I still in caps lock? No, I'm not. Finish legend. All right, and we are dealing with the new construction phase. All right. Usually for what we're working on, this is not important. But if something's not working, it probably has something to do with this. All right. So then we're going to start creating which parameters we're going to use. So we needed mark. All right. Let's look at what else we need. We need material. Okay. I'm probably going to. It looks like there's already a material that maybe was brought in, or Lori has already done this. It looks like. Well, let's just see what that gives us. All right. Yep, it was added in. So this is a parameter that's just set up for casework. Or did Chauncey, did you do that?
Nope.
Okay. But it is a text parameter, all right? So we can actually we can just say that that applies to all categories. All right. What else do we need? Manufacturer and pattern and color and name. All right. So let's come through here. I can't read this. There it is. Material manufacturer. Let's do material model. Now, material, we can throw a description in there to see what's in there. We'll throw a material name in there. It actually looks like I need, because since we're dealing with the material itself, I need to be putting parameters that deal with material. So anything that has material in front of it. All right, so I actually need the material mark. All right, manufacturer model, description, name. We'll just go with that for now. All right, we'll put them in the right order. Sort by, we'll do by mark. Actually, sort by mark and the name. And we want to do itemize every instance. The reason I put by name in there is because not all the materials have a mark yet. So if we just leave this, I'm just going to leave this like, so we're going to do sort by material mark, and we hit OK. Okay. So we itemized every instance. We obviously have a lot of materials in here that we're going to need to filter out. Okay. All right. We can see that we have a lot of instances of the cast stone 1. All right. So in order to get to this right here, we don't want every instance of this material that shows up to show up in the filter or in the schedule. So if we turn off itemize every instance, we're now only going to get this right here. And that's because we only really have one. This is materials that have a mark, and this is materials that do not have a mark right here. All right. So what we would need to do at this point is come through and just to get a couple different materials with marks, we're going to go back to our elevation. All right, and I'm going to tag a couple of these. We're only going to do a few examples so you get the idea. Material tag, mark. Alright, so we'll do our brick. TC blend. These look like the same ones. I think this is the dark one. And we will also do glass. Actually, that's a brick panel. Let's do glass. And just to make sure that we're getting the right thing there. What would we do brick with? Just BR. All right. just, since I used my mark tag, I'm actually filling out the mark parameter for that material when I input this information. So now if I go back to my schedule, it's obviously not the schedule. All right, we can see that that has updated this information here. Now it looks like the parameters that we chose here, we chose poorly. This material doesn't look like it's anything that's updatable, or this parameter, sorry, doesn't look like, except in brick there, that it's something that we can update, or in glass, sorry. And that's probably because we chose a parameter that's tied to multiple categories, right? So once again, since we're dealing with just materials, we probably need to come back and we would need to make a parameter specifically for this. So I don't know if I might have to do that from the material dialog box actually. So to do that, we would save and then go to the materials dialog box. And trying to remember how to add this parameter. All right, so this is for TC. Let's go to our glass real quick. All right, GL1, we're good there. Let's see if this works for updating our schedule. Did not. Oh, there it is right there. That's what we're looking for. Okay. So, to emphasize the point that we need to be looking for material in front of the parameter there, that deals with the parameter. Okay. So we can see now that we can actually type stuff in here as well.
So the other one didn't work just because it didn't...
So because material parameters are specifically for materials, the other parameter was specifically for objects like walls, casework, cabinetry, structural columns, things like that. So because this parameter is specifically for materials, you know, it's going to be something that we can control both from the materials dialog box and from our material schedule here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So
Sorry about the confusion there.
why wouldn't you just use the description from that column instead, because it's actually pulling...
This description?
Oh, because it's not in it. Okay.
Yeah. So in this case, we know that these are both brick, right? BR1 and BR2. But you can see the description is being used for that elevation. Okay? So you could, if you were the first one to get in there and start updating materials and creating materials, you could do it the other way around. Okay? There's nothing that came down off the mountain set in stone that says that you have to use the description parameter for this column and the material parameter for this column. You could use the description parameter for what you're trying to accomplish here. Okay. It's just a matter of being consistent with which parameter contains which information. So to keep going here, I think I don't know if we have a manufacturer for the brick, but the model number would be something like TCU blend. Okay. All right, so that's kind of a quick rundown on creating the finished legend, right? And that kind of completes the circle of getting information out via the tag and getting information out via the finished legend, and also getting information into the material itself. So we can see now that we've added this information into this material, we can come back into the material dialog box. I'm going to go to the brick. By the way, typing, this is a keyword search, so you can actually search for materials that have brick in the title itself or anywhere in the information over here in identity or graphics or appearance. You can see that I searched for brick and it actually brought back a Bobrick soap dispenser because the word brick is in there. You can also, let's see, it will sometimes yield results that don't actually have the word brick in the title, and it's probably because it uses a material asset for appearance that's for brick or something of that nature. See if I can find, yep, so there we go. We added the TCU blend information into the model parameter on the schedule and it updated here. All right, and I believe we also updated the custom parameter material to say brick, and that showed up here as well. So it's a two-way stream there, updating between the material dialog box and the finish legend. So if this is a really good way to manage your materials that you have in a project that you're using. Now, as we mentioned, we also have these two rows here, which basically says we've got a bunch of materials in here that don't have any information set into them. So if you were really a control freak about this, you could create a master finish schedule which shows every single material in the project and manage the information that way.
But there's no way to hide this just to what lines.
There is actually. So we can actually come in here and create a filter, and we can say if the material mark sometimes is greater than 0 will actually work. Let's see if that works here. Because technically there's nothing in there, so that did work in this case. So you can actually use that, or if you don't like, if that doesn't work, you can go in and create another custom material that says appears in finished legend or something like that. You can go and put an X in all the materials that you want to show up, and then you can filter by that. But the tricky thing about the filter, which hopefully they figure this out because it's been one of the big complaints about scheduling, is that all the filters are filter by, and then all you have here are ands. So it has to meet every condition that you filter by in order for it to show up here. So there is no or option. So you can't say filter by mark equals BR and or if it's a cast stone, or mark equals CS. So you have to do, it has to meet every condition that's in here. Any other questions?
How do you add the gray line to separate the material types, like separate the brick from the cast stone and glass?
So if we wanted to sort these by a classification, okay, that's where you have to start getting in and getting a little bit more complicated with how you're creating the actual schedule. So let's see. In this case, we would need to go into, for this specific example, let's create custom parameter. Let's see if I can create another parameter here. I'm not the only one that is having a really hard time reading that, right? Okay. Pretty much. Time to get Revit checked. That might be the end of it because Revit doesn't seem to be wanting to do anything here.
Did you save, Carl?
I detached from Central, so we're good. It might actually be TeamViewer. There it goes. It was waiting for Kelly to say pound.
Bump it.
So project parameters, we're going to create womp womp. So we're going to create a material parameter. We're going to call that classification. So that'll be material class, even though it looks like material glass. And it's going to be a text parameter. And we're going to put it, I'll just put it under text for now. And it's going to be a type parameter because, just kidding, it's going to be an instance parameter because it doesn't let us choose materials under types.
Did you just start over?
No. All right, so we've got, and we can actually define a default parameter or value for this if we wanted to, but we don't want to in this case. All right. So I've created that, and I'm going to add that into our schedule. So I go down to material, class. I'm going to add that down at the bottom here because I'm actually going to hide that. And we're going to say that this is a brick material, and then Revit's going to really think about it. Brick material as well.
Do those have to be typed exactly the same?
Yes. So cast stone here. But once you've typed it once, if you're concerned about it being the same, you can actually see you have a drop-down box there. You can actually select it. So once you've entered something, you can come and select something that's previously been entered. And then for the last one, we'll call that glass. Now this could be used the same way that this other dialogue. Or we've got acoustical ceiling tile for several of them. Okay, I guess if I were really thinking straight, I could have just put that in right there, which would have been fine. So in this case, I'm going to come in here by sort, and I'm going to sort by mark, and then I'm going to sort by class, and I'm going to tell it that I want to put a blank line in between, and that's really the closest we can get to it being a gray line. It'll be a separator bar between, or it won't be.
What we see it on the sheet?
I think I need to do it the other way around. Class and then mark. All right, we're going to put a blank line between the classes. So there you go. That's what you're looking for right there. So if we put that on a sheet, because Chauncey's awesome and I like when he asks questions. What would that be? 10s? 9s? There we go, look at that. There's even a sheet in this project for it. This is where I find out Lori's already got a finished schedule created. Look at that. She's already got one created.
Probably not the way you want it.
Well, it's on a sheet, and if it uses parameters, then that's all I want. Right? So you can see how that will appear. Okay, so it doesn't quite give the gray bars. You can go in and under the Appearance tab, you can outline the entire schedule. All right, so we'll outline it. We can do grid lines. Blank, what does that say? Blank row before data? Yeah, okay, we'll keep that. So if I hit OK there, I'm going to go back to our sheet. So you can see it went ahead and outlined the whole thing. All right. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Next. Anything else? Any other questions? Since these parameters obviously aren't named how we want it to be showing up in the schedule, you can actually go in here and just type in whatever you want to show up. So this would be symbol. All right. And I'm just going to do that one. So if I go back to our sheet now, you can see that it updated that parameter in the column to say symbol instead of material mark.
That doesn't actually change your parameter.
Correct. It only changes the appearance on the display on the schedule.
So in this case, is mark the only parameter that you can't have the same information type twice?
Well, because materials, you can't have. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. So a toilet, you can have multiple instances of the same one, right? And an instance parameter applies to instance 1 separately than it does from instance 2. Well, technically you can't have multiple instances of the same material. It's just applied in different places. So really, it's just, even though it comes up as all the parameters for materials come up as an instance, it applies to everything. So anything that you change in that materials dialog box changes everywhere in the project.
I did have a problem though on Toll Drive. Miss Danielle, where we would have like a blank line, and I would go in and I would enter all the whatever, all the information, and it would all be there in the materials like it was supposed to be, but somewhere someone else had entered that whatever as the mark, and so it was pulling the bad one and not the good one. It wasn't. There were two.
So there were two materials using
PT1
PT1.
Overriding the good one.
Okay, and that just comes down to having to really manage the information that you have in the project. In this case, in this project, I have an instance where we have about 5 different gypboard materials that are being used and 3 different metal stud materials that are being used. And the only thing that I've been able to do to manage that is to go in and change the ones that I don't want being used to have like a pink fill material. So in 3D and in cut views, anytime I see pink or blue, I know that it needs to be changed to the correct material.
Oh, wow.
So in that same case, if you know that a material is not correct, if you can find it in the material dialog box, because I think I remember what you were talking about, we were having problems even finding the bad material.
So you have to put every single material in the,
Right.
in the dialog box.
So there's no way of just saying select all of that particular and then change it wherever you see it. There's nothing like that.
Not for
And they
materials.
wouldn't just both show up on the
Yeah, I've had that
legend.
happen with toilets.
Now, what you can do is, remember I was saying in this materials dialog box, the search up here isn't just for the name. So I could have come up here and say CS1, not +1. All right, and it's going to give us every material that uses CS1 for a mark. All right, or let's see how many PT1s there are in the project. There are none. All right, anything that says BR. All right, so this is an example of not quite the information that I want, because I'm getting a bunch of gypboard and bricks and anything that has BR associated to it. But maybe if I come in and type BR dash, all right, so there we go. So this is a good reason to have a good naming convention, so that you can do quick searches like this. If I just search for gyp, okay, and I think every single one of these are being used in the project. You can see that I've changed the ones that I don't necessarily need. So it looks like some new ones have been brought in even since then. So it really comes down to, you have to manage the information that's in the model, not just the way it looks on a sheet, but the actual information that's in the model. even the information that's not being used. And this is why Chad and I are so against importing stuff, because anytime you import something from another project, it brings in materials and parameters that you don't want. These USG chipboard materials were probably brought in when somebody imported some walls from a different project. So there's a lot of information management that you have to deal with when you start getting into this level of intelligence as far as how you want your materials to work in the project itself.
So would it be better than we just build everything from that model, like in that project, and that model, and not import anything else?
Well, ideally, that's what these material libraries are for down here. So we have started creating. There is on at Revit, there is a material libraries folder which has some libraries for Revit already built in. And actually, I don't think there's just for Revit. I think you can also use these in 3D Studio. And this includes materials, like the material name itself, the appearance asset, the graphics asset, the identity, and all that information is built into these right here. So as you're creating, like if we know that there's going to be a lot of TCU work, so we should really be adding a bunch of stuff to the TCU library as we're going to keep using it. And that should really start populating. And let's go back to it real quick so you can see what happens when you load it. Material libraries, TCU material, open. So you can see now there's some materials from other TCU projects. And then that's a good way to manage the information, because then you know that someone who's put the information in the library has looked at it and it's got the information that you want and it's been managed to some degree.
Way I've already done it.
Managed? Yeah.
Way I've already done it.
Any other questions? Don't let Mark scare you. He just wants to know what we're doing. All right. Well, I think that was a pretty good use of an hour.
Yeah.
If there's any questions, let me know. When it comes to creating those really complicated tags, left align, right align, feel free to ask myself, Tyler, or Kelly, or even Maury probably for creating those families themselves. Or if you want to know how, we can probably sit down with you and show you how it's done.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.